Some works of art don't just entertain you, they create an experience that touches you so deeply and profoundly that it feels like you'll never be able to forget them. After you encounter them, you're left wandering around for days in complete stupor, not knowing what to do with your life now. This is what happened to me with the TV series by David Lynch and Mark Frost, Twin Peaks, and the video game Disco Elysium by the Estonian studio Zaum. I found these two profoundly similar, like they were copies of each other reflected in a weird mirror. At first it seemed like the similarity has to do with their plot. They both are centered around a murder mystery in some godforsaken place. They both follow the actions of a detective with weird methods accompanied by a logical and straightforward partner.
Tell me, the idea for all this really came from a dream?
But as we follow these investigations, we gradually realize that the point is not in the murder itself, the point is somewhere else entirely. Disco Elysium and Twin Peaks, while appearing to be normal detective stories, turn out to be investigations of their whole fictional worlds, their people, and reality itself. And similarly enough, they both start with a town. In most films and books, the urban environment, be it a city, a town, or a village, is not taken to be an integral part of the work itself. They serve more as a decoration to the events that are happening in the story and could be replaced with any other city, town, or village without any substantial loss to the quality of the work. That is completely different with Twin Peaks and Disco Elysium. In both of them, the town or the city where the actions unroll are an important and irreplaceable part of what constitutes these works. Take Twin Peaks. We cannot imagine this story being outside the cobweb or labyrinth of its woods, rivers, long and lost highways, and large cozy houses surrounded by complete darkness. And this is not just because of the story itself. Naturally, such places as the sawmill or the police station are essential to the story, but the whole TV series also tries to tell us that it's not just about the story, but about the people that live in the town and the mysteries they're experiencing. David Lynch in one of his interviews said that the murder of Laura Palmer was supposed to be receding into the background as you got to know the people of the town, and indeed, it is this overwhelming amount of personal secrets, questionable relations between characters, love triangles, etc. that make this whole series alive. But it's not just about the people. The geography of the town itself plays a huge role here. Twin Peaks is located in a very liminal space on the edge of things, on the edge between nature and culture, on the edge between water and land, on the edge between one country and another. And it's pretty hard to live on the edge. The edge is not a place for living, it is a place for passing by. In that respect, it's important to mention the map that David Lynch drew of Twin Peaks. On this map we can see the peculiar planning of the town. It's split in half by its highway, as if reflecting its duality on the edge between White Lodge and the Black Lodge. And the town itself doesn't even have a defined center, as if saying Twin Peaks is just as dead as its dead protagonist Laura Palmer. So the geography and the planning of this town also form a kind of symbolic structure where the locations of streets, houses, mountains, and highways all have a certain meaning, making this a truly unique place. But here lies the paradox. Even though Twin Peaks is unique in being not just a background but a symbolic structure of its own, it still has a kind of eerie omnipresence that gives us the feeling that the same horrible things could happen next door to us. Thing is, the uniqueness of Twin Peaks is not apparent. On the outside, to a random passerby or a random Albert Rosenfield, it seems to be a place completely like any other with its diners, factories, trees, and cozy houses.
I have seen some slipshod backwater burgs, but this place takes the cake.
The uniqueness of the place, the weird that envelops it, only becomes visible when you look much closer, when you look behind the apparent reality. And when you do find it, you get the strangest feeling. If such extraordinary things are possible in such a small and remarkable town, then it's quite possible that some similar extraordinary things can be happening next door to your house, or even right in your house. Similarly, in Disco Elysium, the city of Revachol itself is also a kind of mysterious living being that has secrets and rules of its own. But while Twin Peaks shifts your perception of it from an apparently familiar little northwestern town towards the mysteries that are hidden in it, Disco Elysium goes a step further. It goes from familiarity towards the complete mystery, but then now and again gets you back to familiarity. You see, when you start playing Disco Elysium, you're submerged into an atmosphere of familiarity. All the decrepit houses, the unemployed people, the crimes, the workers' strikes, immediately make it seem like a natural extension of our own world. We can easily imagine that Revachol is just some fictional city somewhere inside the very real Eastern Europe or Latin America at some point in history. But then as we progress and find out more about the city, we get the idea that the world of Elysium is completely fictional with no relation to the real world. This game creates a whole new world with its history and laws. And like with Twin Peaks, this world is governed by forces we cannot possibly comprehend. We have to get knowledge about it piece by piece, and even by the end of the game, we cannot really solve the mystery of the whole of it. It just lies outside human understanding. However, as we progress further still, Disco Elysium does strike us back with a resemblance of some kind. It does put allusions to the history of our own world. Take Krasmazov, the creator of Mazovianism, who strangely resembles Karl Marx, or the Republic of Samara, with its bear wrestling introduced to fight alcoholism, which is an obvious satire of Russia. So essentially, Disco Elysium works by constant movement towards familiarity and away from it, where the familiar appears as strange and the strange becomes familiar. In both Twin Peaks and Disco Elysium, the urban environment creates an experience of mystery. The city or the town doesn't want you to know what's hidden in it. But in both cases also, the bigger mystery is what stands behind the town, what drives all the weirdness happening in it. And in both cases, it turns out, what drives it is nature. The general feeling we get from watching Twin Peaks and playing Disco Elysium might be called by the word eerie. In one of his books, the philosopher Mark Fisher says that the feeling of the eerie is connected with the question of existence and non-existence, and specifically with the question of agency. The eerie is felt when we find something existing in a place where it shouldn't, or when there's something that would otherwise be a passive object in the world has an agency and subjectivity of its own. This is exactly what happens in Twin Peaks. This town is full of things that acquire agency. The log that can give prophecies, the owls that are like eyes of something mysteriously huge behind them, or the woods that hide and embody a lot of mysteries. We may notice that most of these eerie things that acquire agency are not man-made, they're instead part of nature itself. And nature is an extremely important part of Twin Peaks. As we've already seen, the town is located on the very edge between the urban environment and the country. The first thing that Dale Cooper notices about the town is the sheer beauty of its trees, the Douglas firs.
Oh, Diane, I almost forgot. Got to find out what kind of trees these are. They're really something.
Ironically though, it is these very trees that will be hiding the source of evil later on. Twin Peaks breaks away with a romanticized view of nature that has existed at least since Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
A name so French, you might as well have been called Pierre Baguette.
Jean-Jacques Rousseau believed nature to be an inherently better place for humanity. Civilization and civil society, he was saying, are what makes us evil. They make us want to impose obligations on one another, while the state of nature is where humans can achieve relative equality and peace. And that is the view that is partially accepted nowadays. We also generally tend to think of nature and environment as something that gives life and peace of mind, as something oppressed by industry and civilization. In Twin Peaks, however, that's different. The civilization and nature, where civilization is bad and nature good, are not opposed here. Instead, Twin Peaks seems to be saying that the evil can be contained in both nature and civilization, and perhaps even more so in nature, hidden somewhere in those dark woods. David Foster Wallace once wrote this interesting passage about the ambivalence of natural forces in the works by David Lynch. Lynch's idea that evil is a force has unsettling implications. People can be good or bad, but forces simply are, and forces are, at least potentially, everywhere. Evil for Lynch thus moves and shifts, pervades, darkness is in everything, all the time, not lurking below or lying in wait or hovering on the horizon. Evil is here, right now, and so are light, love, redemption, since these phenomena are also, in Lynch's work, forces and spirits, etc. In fact, in a Lynchian moral scheme, it doesn't make much sense to talk about either darkness or about light in isolation from its opposite. It's not just that evil is implied by good or darkness by light or whatever, but that the evil stuff is contained within the good stuff encoded in it. In Disco Elysium, the relation of Revachol and nature is not so apparent. At first, you might even think nature practically doesn't exist in this post-revolutionary and post-war messy place covered by cracked concrete. But even when you do find some signs of its existence, it's put to some extreme ill use, like to hang a dead body off a tree. Only later on do we find out that, quite similarly to Twin Peaks, here nature also acquires some sort of ambivalent agency, a subjectivity that is both good and evil, a personality that can exhibit beauty and wish revenge. In that respect, a significant part of the game is the whole situation surrounding the Pale, the special tissue that surrounds the livable parts of Elysium. As we find out closer to the end of the game, the Pale is not static, it also grows, just like any organic matter. The Pale is the likely reason for all the mysteries surrounding the district of Martinez, and the Pale will eventually bring apocalypse to the world of Elysium.
It will devour everything.
One other important episode, and probably one of the best in the whole game, is the meeting with the Insulindian Phasmid at the very end. The Phasmid is the very embodiment of oppressed nature. It's been hidden from human knowledge for years and centuries, only letting itself be seen by few people throughout history. And yet the Phasmid is a creature that is both good and evil, and perhaps it is neither. In one part of the dialogue we find out that the Phasmid has eaten its own child, in another we feel pity for it because of it being oppressed by civilization. In that respect, the final thought options we get before the Phasmid disappears are very indicative, because strangely the Phasmid can be both the kindest, the scariest, and the most beautiful of all the creatures we've ever met, which makes it so contradictorily real and attractive, arousing in us a feeling close to a religious revelation. And then the Phasmid also says one important thing. He reveals that the Pale was brought by no one else than humanity itself, that it was a nervous shadow cast into the world by you, eating away at reality. So, similarly to Twin Peaks, nature here, embodied by the Pale, turns out to be more like a mirror that reflects the essential darkness of the human being, step by step devouring all around it. The human being turns out to be not the victim, but the only perpetrator, the bringing to the world nothing else but chaos and madness. And the central role in diagnosing this madness in both cases is played by the detective and his contradictory identity.
Want to be free. Want to be free. It will last forever.
The question of identity is also central to both Twin Peaks and Disco Elysium. In the former, as we've already seen, the question of duplicity is found all around the series. There are two mountains, two parts of the town, two lodges, etc. The same concerns the people who live in Twin Peaks. Many of them are torn between two different identities, one for the daytime and one for the night, one good and one evil, like it happens with Laura Palmer or Dale Cooper. Strangely enough, it is this very duplicity that characterizes them, makes them so tangible and so real to us, but also extremely painful. The already mentioned David Foster Wallace had a great comment on that. This is what Lynch is about in this movie, both innocence and damnation, both sinned against and sinning. Laura Palmer in Fire Walk With Me is both good and bad, and yet also neither. She's complex, contradictory, real. However, Wallace also makes a good remark about the implications of such reality. Precisely because characters like Laura Palmer are so real, we constantly get reminded that all the weird stuff happening in this series is not that much different from our own reality. After all, we're also both innocent and damned. Wallace writes, "We hate this possibility in movies, we hate this both comes off as sloppy characterization, muddy filmmaking, lack of focus. At any rate, that's what we criticized Fire Walk With Me's Laura for. But I submit that the real reason we criticized and disliked Lynch's Laura's muddy bothness is that it required of us an empathetic confrontation with the exact same muddy bothness in ourselves and our intimates that makes the real world of moral selves so tense and uncomfortable, a bothness we go to the movies to get a couple hours relief from." This is exactly what makes Twin Peaks so uncomfortable to watch. It doesn't give answers, it asks questions. Questions about our identity, who we are, and what we are doing in this place called reality. This partly has to do with the same concept of the eerie I've already spoken about. If reality is a place where things are not what they seem, how can we be so sure that we are what we seem? Or, in the words of Mark Fisher, what kind of agent is acting here? Is there an agent at all? If we are not who we think we are, what are we? Disco Elysium takes these questions and gets them to a totally new level, which has to do with the medium itself. You see, when we watch a movie or read a book, we can't help feeling helpless. The movie or the book dictate what happens in them, taking away part of our subjective will to influence what happens in them. With video games, that's different, because they give us ways to control what happens in the game. In some games, that control is purely nominal, where the choices you make aren't really essential to how the story develops in the future. That's different with Disco Elysium. In Disco Elysium, the choices you make, the words you say, the items you pick up, almost all have consequences for what unrolls further in the game. In that respect, Disco Elysium seems to be a perfect embodiment of the philosophy of existentialism. Jean-Paul Sartre, the big brain behind it, was saying that the essence of a human being is no longer predetermined by some external reasons. There is no longer a God that gives us meaning to live and a clear path to follow. In that context, he coined the famous expression, existence precedes essence, meaning that first you are born and then you are supposed to form an essence of your own. And existentialism from its very conception was going hand in hand with the matters of identity. Existentialism posits that you are the creator of your own identity, instead of this identity being provided by someone else. Disco Elysium is to a large part about essence after existence. The beginning of the game is a kind of birth for the main character, who has suffered amnesia and doesn't remember who he is. So we as players are supposed to recollect and reconstruct his essence, his identity, but by reconstructing we unavoidably provide him with features that he would otherwise never have. However, what makes it interesting is that Disco Elysium also problematizes these philosophical matters. To what extent does existence precede essence? Can you start with a blank slate in the middle of your life, just like Harry Dubois? As the game shows, the essence of Harry Dubois from his previous life still catches up with us now and again, but now it's our turn to either internalize those parts of his past essence or discard them. Being a role-playing game, Disco Elysium also achieves another longed-for dream that has followed literature for a long time. Jorge Luis Borges, in his short story The Garden of Forking Paths, conceives of a book that doesn't lead you along a predefined path. Instead, it forks, it splits into numerous paths every now and again, allowing the reader to take whatever path they would like to. Borges writes, "In all fiction, when a man is faced with alternatives, he chooses one at the expense of the others. In the almost unfathomable Tsui Pen, he chooses simultaneously all of them. He thus creates various futures, various times which start others that will in their turn branch out and bifurcate in other times." Disco Elysium seems to be a great implementation of such a book. Although surely it does have its limits and forbidden paths, it still allows for this incredible simultaneousness described by Borges, because Disco Elysium itself is a garden of forking paths, and it's up to its reader or player to decide what path they choose. And the path they choose may be unsettling for us personally. I'd even say more, it's probably going to be unsettling for us personally, because coming back to our discussion of Twin Peaks, the questions of identity invariably lead us to complex and real ourselves, exposing some of our deepest contradictions. Or, quoting Wallace again, "It's little wonder that I find Lynch's movies sick. Nothing sickens me like seeing on screen some of the very parts of myself I've gone to the movies to try to forget about."